Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Assembly Lines Podcast. I'm Chris Torrance. Today, I want to tell you about some new products from my friend Henry Corbis at ReActiveMicro. So let's get started. Our Apple II computer systems aren't getting any younger, and as I'm sure you've experienced, lots of things can go wrong with them, including sticky keys on the keyboard, failing RAM chips, or power supply issues. Henry Corbis has made a name for himself over the past few years with solving power supply issues for the Apple II line of computers. He has several different versions of his kits available, and these range from simple drop-in replacements for the guts of the power supply to full-blown replacements of the entire power supply with the enclosure. With Henry's latest power supply kit, he's added some cool features. So let's take a look at what comes in the kit. The new product from ReActiveMicro is called the Universal Enclosure Power Supply Unit, and it comes in several different variations depending upon your needs or your budget. The base unit consists of the power supply unit itself, and you can get this in either a kit form or pre-assembled like you see here. Over here on the right, you can see the deluxe form where it comes with the meters for voltage as well as fans. And again, you can get this as either pre-assembled or a kit. So let's see what we get. The first thing is the case itself, and you can see that Henry's done this in the same way as his other power supply kits, where it has a breakaway depending on whether you're using this in a 2 or 2 Plus or a 2E. Along with that are the sides for the case, and so these are high quality metal, and we'll be showing how to assemble those in a bit. Then there's the actual power supply itself, and this is the same power supply that Henry includes with his ultimate power supply kit. Along with the case and the power supply, we have all of the other bits and bobs that you need. So for example, here are the plugs and the switch. Here's the cable that carries the voltages from the power supply to the Apple II motherboard. We have the LCD readouts for plus and minus 5 volts and plus and minus 12 volts here. And then we also have 2 fans. So there's another version of this kit for the 2GS, which Joe Strohsnyder is going to review. And that one comes with a little different components, and it comes with 1 fan that mounts directly on top. The Apple IIe version comes with 2 fans that mount on the side. Finally, Henry has thoughtfully included everything that you need to actually assemble the kit, including some solder, an eraser to clean the PCB boards, some solder flux to clean the boards, as well as a wrist strap to prevent static electricity. Let's go ahead and dive in and see how to assemble the kit. One thing that Henry is really good at is providing detailed, clear instructions, and the Universal Enclosure is no exception to that. The first thing that he recommends doing is attaching the mounting nuts for the actual power supply itself. The power supply will mount on top of these nuts, and then the screws will hold it down. But to make sure that we actually get the nuts in the proper position, what we'll do is we'll actually just screw them in from the bottom, and then we'll solder down the points, and that way we'll be sure that they're in the correct position. And then now that we have them tightened down, we're going to go ahead and put flux on all 4 of these, and then we're just going to solder these posts in place. Alright, I've got the 4 mounting posts done. One thing to keep in mind, these can actually get really hot because they have a lot of mass, so make sure to let them cool off before touching them. I actually forgot to break off the tab here for the Apple II Plus, so I'm going to go ahead and do that now. It doesn't really matter whether you break it off or not for the 2E, so I'm going to go ahead and just break it off anyway, and then I can use it in either my Apple II Plus or the 2E. The only reason you need to break it off for the 2 Plus is because the speaker is in a slightly different position, and if you don't break this off, then it won't be able to sit properly. So let's go ahead and snap that off now. And that came off nice and clean. The next thing we want to do is solder on the sides to the case. I've used clamps here to hold the whole thing together, but you could just as easily use rubber bands or anything else that you had lying around. You want to make sure when you're doing this that you get the cutouts for the voltage LCDs on the correct side of the case. So looking at the bottom of the case where it says Universal Power Supply Enclosure, you want the cutouts on the right hand side. So this will be visible from the inside of the case. And that's because the two fans are going to mount on the outside here, right flush with the side of the Apple II case. And again, all we want to do is just put some small beads of solder along the edge here. Henry recommends putting some every couple inches, but you could just as easily run all the way down if you felt like it. Now that we have the sides assembled, we can go ahead and put in the plug as well as the switch. The plug goes in from the inside of the case, and then the switch just snaps in from the outside. And when you snap it in, make sure to put the 0 at the bottom and the 1 at the top. Okay, just like that. To wire things up, we have to do both the AC and the DC. The first thing we want to do is wire up the switch. So we are going to run the load from the AC into the bottom of the switch, and then the top of the switch will go over to the power supply. We'll do the green wire in the middle, then the blue neutral wire. Okay, and then finally we'll do the brown load wire from the switch. Alright, now it's finally time to mount our power supply itself, and just be sure to mount the AC end towards the back of the power supply. And we'll go ahead and we'll screw that in now using the 4 screws from the top. Alright, let's go ahead and put in the wires into the spring connector here, and make sure to read the labels carefully to make sure that you're putting the correct wires in. So just look at the label here. So here it's labeled NGL for neutral ground load. Your power supply might be the opposite order, so just make sure to double check before putting it in. Alright, those look good. So we've got our AC power all wired up. Next, let's go ahead and install the voltage meters. I've gone ahead and taken apart the big one just to make it easier to install. So there's just 2 little tabs on the side, and you just pop those out. And this just gets shoved in from the outside like that. And then you can go ahead and put the inside back together. Make sure to orient it correctly so that the decimal points are to the right of the numbers, otherwise it'll be backwards. And then this just gets slipped back in like that. And then we can do the same thing and install the -5 volts and ±12 volt meters. And again, make sure that your decimal points are in the correct orientation. And these just get pushed in from the back like that. And then there's 2 screws for each to hold it in. The next thing we want to wire up is the LCDs for -12, -5, and +12 volts. And to do that, you just need to insert the wires from the LCDs into the little posts here on the power supply. Now, 2 of them actually share the same ground wire. So what I did is I actually just twisted the wires together and soldered them, because otherwise if you try and just put them in there separately, one of them will just pop out. To insert these into the connectors here, you just press down on the little plastic tab and then just stick in the wire. And just follow the directions on the wiki for the order of putting them in. Now we're ready to wire up the +5 volt meter, and this actually has 2 components. It has the voltmeter as well as the amp meter. We're going to wire up the voltmeter first. To do that, we use the 3-prong plug. We don't need the black wire because we'll just get the ground from the other current meter. However, we do need both the red wire and the yellow wire to be spliced together and go into pin 5 on the power supply. So I cut off about 1.5 inches of wire just to make it a little bit shorter. I'm going to go ahead and strip these and then solder them together to insert into the pin, and then I just completely remove the black wire entirely. For the current meter, this works a little bit differently than the voltage meter. The voltmeter, you just need to put the meter across the positive and negative of whatever you're trying to measure. For a current meter, you're measuring the current along a wire. And so what we need to do is we actually need to splice the current meter into our power cable here. And we're going to do that along the white and black wires. These are both ground. By splicing in the current meter along these two wires, we'll actually be able to measure the entire current draw of the Apple II system. So to do this, what you want to do is you want to actually cut the power connector cable maybe about 1.5 inches away from the end of the cable. And you want to make sure to do this at the white plastic end, not the end that plugs into the motherboard. Otherwise, you just won't have enough room to reach back to the meter. And then we're going to strip about 1/2 inch from each end of these and then just splice it in to the red and black wires. All right, so we'll take our white and black wires here closest to the power plug from the power supply, and we're going to insert these into one side of the Wago connector. And these are a little bit difficult to pry up, so don't be afraid to use a lot of force when you're doing that. So we'll just put them both in there and then clamp down and make sure that that's tight. And then we'll take our plug here that goes to the multimeter and we'll just stick that into the other end and clamp down. Okay, so that's tight. And then we'll just repeat the same procedure for the other end of the wires. And then this can actually just be plugged into the multimeter, and this can be plugged into the power supply. Now, actually, one more thing I want to do before I plug everything in is I want to actually add in the fan so we can actually measure the current draw from the fans as well. So let's go ahead and do that. For the two fans that go along with the power supply, I decided I wanted to make them removable in case I changed my mind. So rather than cutting off the plugs on the fans, which is what Henry recommends, instead I just used some pin connectors that I had wiring around, and you can see I wired the two black wires into the Wago connector with the red thick wire, and then the two red wires go into slot number 6 here, which is the plus 12 volts, which is what's needed to power the fans. So now I can just plug these into the fans themselves, just like that. Let's go ahead and we'll plug the wire harness into the power supply, making sure that the triangle on the connector itself matches up with the triangle on the power supply. Let's go ahead and install it into the Apple II and see how everything works. Okay, the moment of truth. I've got it wired up to power. Let's go ahead and flip the switch and see what happens. Okay, so everything starts up, the fans are working. All right, here's minus 12 volts, so that looks rock solid. This is minus 5 volts, that also looks great. This is plus 12 volts, and then on the plus 5 volts, we're at 4.92, and our load here is 0.2 amps, which actually makes sense because we don't have this wired into the Apple II yet, and each of these fans is supposed to draw 0.1 amps. Let's go ahead and connect it up to the Apple II. Oh, and one more thing, if you're wondering what that double beep was when the Apple II started up, that was the sound of a CFFA3000 card booting up. There's something a little bit interesting about this particular CFFA3000 card though. This is actually ReActiveMicro's clone of the card. These cards have been unobtainium for several years, ever since Rich did his final run of them, and so it's great that Henry was able to work with Rich to bring it back into production. They'll be available at the ReActiveMicro's store in just a couple of weeks. I hope you enjoyed this tour of Henry Corbis's new Universal Enclosure Power Supply unit. It'll be available soon from ReActiveMicro. If you're looking for a new power supply for your Apple II, 2+2E, or 2GS, and you're also looking for the option to add things like voltmeters or a fan, I think this is a great option. You can purchase it as either pre-assembled or as a kit. I'd actually recommend getting it as a kit. As long as you have reasonable soldering skills, it's easy to put together, and Henry is nice enough to include everything that you need except for the soldering iron itself. I also mentioned that Henry is coming out with a CFFA3000 clone, so be sure to look for that in his store as well. Full disclosure, Henry gave me the power supply kit and the CFFA3000 for testing purposes. If you enjoyed this video, please consider supporting me on Patreon. I have a link in the show notes below. Also, if you're not already a subscriber on YouTube, I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the subscribe button. I'm getting very close to 2,000 subscribers, and once I hit that mark, I can actually choose to remove ads on my videos. Once again, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.